There are three tropes that are so apparent in the Thai dramas I watch today compared to the Western shows I used to watch a few years ago. I consider them the three Thai drama sins. These are the trivialization of sexual assault, colorism, and fat shaming. These are tropes that cannot be avoided in the Thai dramas you and me watch. And today I want to tackle the third sin, fat shaming. It's funny because out of the three sins, it's the one that touches me the most as a fat woman, yet it's also the one I tend to dismiss the most. But even though Thai dramas do take fat shaming to the next level, let's be honest, the representation in Western media isn't great either. And I've gotten used to fat people never being the main character, never having a love story, and basically always being the butt of the joke since basically birth. So when I first witnessed fat shaming in Thai series, I was surprised at how obvious it was compared to Western series that tend to make it a little more subtle now, but I still shrugged it off. Don't get me wrong, it annoys me to no end, but it doesn't hurt me either because I'm so used to it. What annoys me though is the millions of Thai kids and teenagers growing up on this series and internalizing this fat phobia to either hate themselves if they're fat or bully others who are fat. So today I want to take a few examples from Thai dramas that are particularly striking to me. These are not at all every instance of fat shaming in Thai dramas. As I've said, there's way too many to count and I've completely stopped paying attention to them anymore. I'll also try to analyze different types of trope around fat characters, even though most dramas just point out a fat character is fat over and over again. Hilarious. This is gonna be a long ass video, so buckle up and let's go. So I really need to start with the number one actor that comes into mind when I think about fat shaming in Thai dramas, and it's Pinkpong Thongchai. I especially want to discuss two of his roles today, even though I am certain that every piece of media he's in is probably only centered around his weight. So the first show I want to talk about is Diary of Tootsies, which I often talk about on this channel as a really good LGBTQ+ inclusive comedy that you should really watch. And as I said in my effeminate gay guy trope video, despite being quite inclusive, this show completely fails at fat shaming. Pinkpong's character Golf is constantly mocked for his weight. His nickname is Ishang, elephant. He's introduced as a fat TV producer.
กอล์ฟหรือชื่อหนึ่งคืออีช้างตุ๊ดอ้วนตำแหน่งโปรดิวเซอร์รายการทีวีด้านเศรษฐกิจและการลงทุน
And you can bet your ass they bring up his weight at any given opportunity.
นึกภาพนะอย่างคุณเนี่ยน่าจะเป็นกระเทยเหมือนตุ่มใหญ่ๆแล้วมีผมแปะอยู่บนหัวเนี่ยคงทุเรศหน้าดูเลยนะกูไม่ใช่ผีนะพวกมึงไปทำอะไรกันตรงนี้
And yes, Golf does have other storylines, and he doesn't necessarily have it worse than the other characters, but he completely does. Golf is treated like literal trash for the whole show, and that's just because he's fat. They don't even try to hide that he's the punching bag because he's fat, therefore he deserves to be humiliated and mocked. And as I said in my intro, I am used to fat characters being the butt of the joke, yet it feels more hurtful in a show that genuinely seems to want to be a good representation of minorities. So if they can be good LGBTQ+ representation, why can't they extend that representation to fat people too? His other role that really had me rolling my eyes was in the movie Bikeman. He only has a few minutes cameo, but you can be sure that his cameo is gonna be all about his weight. So the whole movie is about a guy who's a motorcycle taxi, and so Pinkpong's character is just coming to take a taxi, but none of the drivers want him because he's gonna deflate the tires because he's so fat.
ใครได้ไปละมึงเอ้ยยางแตกแน่กูไม่เอาอ่ะ
That's literally the whole joke. His whole role is just one big fat joke.
น้องน่ารักจังเลยนะคะคิดว่าตัวเองเป็นใครคิดว่าตัวเองดีมากใช่ไหมรอเลือกได้เหรอ
Another actor I immediately think about when I think about fat shaming in Thai dramas, and I'm sure you do too, is Samantha Melanie Coates. I have seen her in a lot of shows: Lovesick 1 and 2, Love by Chance 1 and 2, Until We Meet Again, My Gear and Your Gown with the tiniest cameo, and apparently she was also in What the Duck, even though I must admit I don't remember that whatsoever. Today I will only comment on her roles in Lovesick and Until We Meet Again, but I'm pretty sure she was fat shamed at some point in Love by Chance, but frankly I'm just too lazy to check. In Lovesick she plays Nong Nan, who's in love with the main character's best friend, Om. Om and his friends nickname her Nong Nan the Carp for some reason because she's obsessed with him and always follows him around and harasses him. Nong Nan is depicted as desperate and pathetic because she desperately wants the attention of a man who does not care for her.
น้องแนนถามถึงมึงด้วยว่ะ
ปลาคาร์ฟอะนะ
ปลาคาร์ฟสุดที่รักของมึงอะโชคดีที่หายที่ขี้แตกไอ้เชี่ย
น้องบักคามึงอะมองมึงตาละห้อยแล้วเนี่ยข้างหลังอะ
ประยุทธ์พี่เจอคนที่น่ารักกว่าน้องแนนอ่ะ
มีเหรอ คนที่น่ารักกว่าน้องแนนอ่ะ
โอ้โหเต็มบ้านเต็มเมืองพุดเดิ้ลปอมปอมเชาเชาน่ารักกว่าน้องแนนทั้งนั้น
She's not always the topic of mockery though, because she is still depicted as a really great and funny friend. But that's kind of the bare minimum from a show that gave an attempted murderer a redemption storyline. I don't really remember a point in the show where they directly call Nong Nan fat, even though Om always expresses his disgust of her appearance. And if I'm wrong and they do call her fat, I'm really sorry. I'm not about to rewatch the 48 Lovesick episodes for the 7th time, because yes, I have no life and I love that show even though it's kind of trash. It is still very clear that Nong Nan is treated the way she is on the show because she is not stick thin like the other female characters. I mean, at least she does end up getting a boyfriend, but of course, he's the chubby one in the group. Because a fat woman can never date. Never date a skinny man. Never. But even though the main fucking character gets fat shamed during the show.
โหน้องใหญ่เนี่ย
โอ้โหระดับกูนะเว้ยฟิตปังดูกล้ามซะก่อน
ไอ้เชี่ยโน่เอ้ยอ้วนขนาดนี้กูว่ามึงไปลดน้ำหนักเถอะไป
มึงพูดเงี้ย
ก็ดูชั้นไขมันเซ่
ชั่วจริงเลย
And I happen to have read the original novel this show is adapted from, and no is never described as a chubby character in it. For me, it just goes to prove that the director saw Captain as chubby back then, which, yes, he wasn't as thin as the other characters, and decided to include those comments in the scripts, which is even more fucked up knowing that Captain was underage at the time of filming the show. And sure, No is still the main character, he's still considered as attractive, so it's definitely not the worst case of a he's not fat, character on screen, but it's just the need to comment on someone's weight that's just frankly concerning to me. Why can't they just let people be a little chubby, a little fat, and not tease them at every occasion? Oh, because it would mean that society is okay with fat people and doesn't see us as disgusting and a waste of space. Got it. Now for Until We Meet Again, I remember watching the first episode and being so happy that they didn't fat shame Sammy's character and thinking, oh yeah, that's great, for once she's gonna play a role that's not being fat shamed. And then they did right the second after.
พอดีว่านี้เดี๋ยวให้ของชมรมนี้เรากินเอง
กินเยอะแล้วบ้องอ้วนล่ะ
โอ้ยไดเอทพรุ่งนี้
And sure, they're not directly calling her fat, but she's still the one who's seen eating all the time, who loves food the most. And they always do not so subtle references to her being fat or needing to go on a diet. But again, if it was just one character for one piece of media, it would be fine. But the problem is that fat people are always linked to food. Always. And the fact that a lot of fat people are fat because of one or multiple eating disorders make it a lot more disrespectful. The fact that some fat people are fat because of conditions that have nothing to do with food makes it also disrespectful. And even if every fat people on earth was fat because they didn't work out and ate all day, the joke has been old for decades. Lol, a fat person eating all the time, that's hilarious! It's not, it's the laziest type of comedy you can do. Mana does get a boyfriend in this series, which is extremely rare for a fat character in any type of media in any country. And even though they have like 5 scenes together, that's a start, I guess. Doesn't make the way her character is treated better though. To keep on the topic of Until We Meet Again, a lovely follower of mine pointed out that Win team from the show are linked to food a lot. They're often talking about weight and how fat the food they're eating is. That follower gave me a lot of examples, but I choose only one because it's for me the most fucked up.
ไม่กินเหรอเฮียช่วงนี้อ้วนเนี่ยเดี๋ยวนี้เขามีสูตรลับกันแล้วก็ทำให้แก้มมีย้วยของเนี่ยใสเรียวแล้วก็กระชับขึ้นเนี่ยไม่เอาอ่ะกลัวอะไรวะคุณภาพเอเปกสักอย่างหายห่วง
In a side story, they advertise a weight loss clinic by having Tim say he can't eat because he's too fat. Which he's not, but even if he was, not eating will only create an eating disorder and not actually make him lose weight in a healthy way. But eating all he wants and expecting a weight loss clinic to fix him for him isn't healthy at all either. Also on the topic of thin actors also talking about weight in BL shows, I wanted to briefly mention the original Ming kids in 2 Moons. They're often linked with food too, but there's one scene when Ming said he didn't buy a Kit Kat for Kit because he didn't want him to be fat.
ผมไม่ได้ซื้อเผื่อพี่นะก็เห็นพี่กลัวอ้วนอ่ะ
And there's also another scene where Ming says he can finally eat what he wants because he's won the Moon title.
จะ 3-4 ล้านก็ได้นะพี่ผมอ่ะไม่ต้องดูแลหุ่นอีกแล้วกินได้เต็มที่เลย
Just like Timuin, this has nothing to do with fat shaming. But it completely shows the mentality around gaining weight in Thailand, and it's genuinely super unhealthy and very scary. And also in this video, I'm not even showing you the hundreds of comments made by female characters in Thai dramas that are afraid of getting fat. Anyways, let's go back to Samantha Melanie quotes. All of her characters are meant to be read as fat and the butt of the joke, when she's not even fat. I'm not gonna start scrutinizing a woman's body, but even though it seems for me from her Instagram pictures that she has lost some weight recently, she has never been fat. But even if she was fat, that wouldn't justify her treatment either. But the whole problematic is not around her being fat or not, it's around her being not thin enough for Thai standards. Okay, so before I give you this example, I really want to tell you why it shocked me particularly. I remember starting to watch Fabulous 30 and catching a glimpse of Gam Wishayani. And I don't pause a show often to reflect on the beauty of people, but here I had to. I remember saying exactly those words, "Oh my god, what a goddess." I was genuinely in love with her features and thought, still think, that she's one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen.
นี่จ๋าแล้วนี่แกรีบกลับมาทำไมอ่ะพวกฉันเตรียมตัวยังไม่เสร็จเลยอ่ะ
Wow.
So imagine my surprise when they made Yui's whole character about how she's never had a relationship because she's ugly. Specifically for being dark-skinned and fat. And no, she's not fat, she's just more curvy than the standard Thai actress. During the whole show, Yui pines after Zen, who's in love with her friend Ja, who is beautiful because she is really pale-skinned and really thin. And listen, I'm about to say something really unfeminist right now, so maybe just do that. But Ja is pretty, she's there. But Yui is all the way up there. She is absolutely gorgeous. What do you mean? Why are you blind like this? Ah! So anyway, it does show that beauty standards are so different according to the country. Because let me remind you that Gam Wishayani went viral last year for being the Thai Elsa on the Oscars, and everyone was so mesmerized by her beauty that they literally became stans. But also it shows that Thai dramas love to put down anything that doesn't fit in their beauty standards. They could just not comment on it, but they have to point it out to say, yes, you're ugly because you're like that. And that's the most fucked up.
โอ้โหไม่ค่อยมีที่นั่งเลยกู
ใครคือเจยุ้ยเหรอ
เจยุ้ย
ไม่ใช่ฉัน
ที่
ไม่ใช่
ดำ
โอ้
คึ
ย
ก
โอ้ย
ใหญ่ๆยักษ์รู้จักปะ
ไม่ใช่ สวยก็ไม่สวยดำก็ดำตัวก็ใหญ่
ทำไมไม่กินอ่ะครับ ไม่อร่อยเหรอ
พี่ไม่กินกลางคืนอ่ะ
เหรอ กลัวอ้วนเหรอ ไม่ทันแล้วมั้ง
Another storyline that really bothered me was one in I'm Timmy Too. So news character Tidet is an ex-fat guy who's really into fitness and who's really muscular now. In his episode we learned that he lost weight because he asked a really thin and popular girl out and she mocked him publicly in front of her friends. And in the same episode we see the same girl years later and she's fat now. So it's truly a storyline about not mocking people because you might end up like them a few years down the line. And that's not really a bad message, even though the real message should be to not bully others, even though we might never be in their shoes, because that's the decent thing to do. That being mean is just so shallow and devoid of any sense in a world where we might die tomorrow, so we should spread happiness instead. Threatening a fat-shaming teenager with the idea that one day they might get fat themselves isn't particularly productive. So with the roles reversed, we see Tidet, contrarily to the girl who was terrible to him, empathize with her. And even take her on a date for the whole day when she says that no one wants to date her because she's fat.
แล้วเชอรี่อะทำไมมาเดินที่นี่คนเดียว
ใครเขาจะอยากเดินกับผู้หญิงอ้วนๆอย่างเราอะ
I volunteer as tribute.
So first of all, no, dating a fat person is not considered an act of charity, sorry to break it to you. But also they just had to make her a pathetic loser who no one wants to date, didn't they? They had to do it. Even though she clearly got style, she knows how to dress, she seems like a really sweet and nice person, and you're gonna tell me not one man wants to date her? I call bullshit. I think what hurt me the most is when Tidet said, "Guess I'm not attracted to her anymore."
เธอคงไม่ใช่คนสวยสำหรับผมแล้วจริง
And that's only then that I genuinely realized where this storyline was going. Because for a small, tiny, ridiculous moment, I thought she was the one he would end up with. They clearly had chemistry and were cute together. He used to like her. She apologized and clearly shows regret about how she treated him. So why couldn't they be together? Because she got fat. She got fat and she lost all of her value. Even though morally she's a much better person now, it doesn't matter. Because the only thing that matters, the only thing, is that she's fat. I am genuinely in love with 1,000 Stars. At the time of filming this, only 4 episodes have been released, but I already know this show is in my top favorite of the year. Honestly, the only thing that annoys me about this show is that, of course, they had to fit in a fat character whose only character trait is being fat. So we're introduced to the kids Tian is gonna teach to in the 2nd episode, and one of the kids is named Galet, and he's a fat kid. And as soon as I saw that kid, I was like, oh, now I know who's gonna be the punching bag. And of course I was right, because some people have a gaydar and I have a fat-shaming dar. It works every time. So the first sentence to describe Calais is that he's the biggest eater in the group. Because of course fat people only character trait is that they eat a lot.
กาแลยืนหนึ่งเรื่องกินประจำหมู่บ้าน
And then in the same episode he almost gets drowned because of course he would be the one to get hurt. I need you all to notice that anytime a show needs someone to get hurt, it's gonna be the fat person. But the scene that probably gave me the most whiplash is in episode 4, where they're testing a scale in class and they make Galet get on it. Which, if you're fat in any way, know how traumatizing that is. But then they put the smallest kid on the scale and put things in his arms to try and match the weight of Galet. And it's played like as a fun class experiment, but if it was in real life, I can guarantee you that Galet would literally be traumatized for life. Like, if someone had done that to me as a kid, and even now, I would need therapy for literally 10 years because of that one event. This is a genuine microaggression. Because while fat people are trying to normalize being fat and accept it as who we are, it doesn't mean that society, and especially the people closest to us, don't try to remind us every 5 seconds that we're fat. So to see a kid that's very much aware that he's fat, publicly humiliated like this, doesn't sit well with me at all. Especially since, well, that fictional character is played by a real fat kid whose first foot in the entertainment industry will forever be being the butt of the joke. So I want to do another focus on an actress, Prin. I'm not gonna say her last name, I'm really sorry. I just don't think I can pronounce it. So I first discovered her in Slam Dance, where she plays Byfriend's rival on the dance team. She is scheming, loud and aggressive, and her weight is commented on a few times. While her weight is not the central trait for her character, I still cannot detach the implication of having her as the villain against lighter-skinned and much thinner Byfriend. Again, the two biggest beauty standards in Thailand. Even though, spoiler, she does get a redemption storyline, I don't think it's enough. In Friendzone 2, again she plays the bad guy with, spoiler, a redemption storyline. Here she is still hating on a thinner and lighter skinned woman, and she's still scheming and just frankly terrible. And in this show her weight isn't commented on whatsoever, which really surprised me in a good way. But again, I can look over the implication her role has. Especially since she self-describes herself as someone no one wants, which is the cause of her jealousy for the main character.
ตอนนี้มึงไม่มีแฟนกับเขาบ้างเหรอวะสวยขนาดเนี้ยหน้าที่การงานก็ดีมันต้องมีได้แล้วป่ะมึงสวยได้ไม่เท่าอีโยกูก็ต้องเหนื่อยหน่อยปะ
Once again, the fat character is shown as undesirable, and even though she got a redemption storyline which I appreciated, it's not enough. Especially when to obtain such redemption, she had to do a suicide attempt. She couldn't have evolved on her own because she's a grown, mature woman. She had to be and have people forgive her out of pity because of it. Another show that's airing as I'm filming this video is Girl 2000, and I cannot avoid discussing the treatment of two of its characters. The first one is Aube, a crime writer who's introduced eating a packet of chips because, of course, he's forever single and constantly hitting on the main character's friend Jelly, whom we'll talk about in a minute. He is immediately portrayed as this overly desperate loser who's barely tolerated by his colleagues. And he's also the literal punching bag of the show. Every time someone needs to be physically hurt or humiliated, you can bet it's gonna be him. And the thing is, that's just not funny. Like, just try the tiniest bit to make me laugh. As for Jelly, it totally went over my head that she's considered chubby for Thai standards. So when they literally put a scene of her weighing herself and being ashamed of the weight, while the main character Mome, who, you've guessed it, is very thin and light-skinned, eats bagels, and Jelly compares herself to her, I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Once again, fat, she's not fat, female characters are portrayed as jealous of the thinner female characters. I promise this is the last one, even though I've missed like 50 other examples. There's a scene in Together With Me that I must have been actively trying to forget because it's completely slipped my mind, and if one of my followers didn't remind it to me, I wouldn't have included it in this video. It's a scene at the end of the show where the evil girlfriend, another sexist trope, we will talk about it in another video, where this evil girlfriend who cheated on Korn gets dumped by her new boyfriend who's dating a fat woman.
เธออยากให้เต้ยกลับมาหาเพลงนะ
นี่แมวแฟนเรา
And she's genuinely so insulted and offended that he would choose a fat woman over her.
นี่หน้าตาแบบเนี้ยเหรอที่เต้ยมาเป็นแฟน
And the boyfriend says very casually in front of his girlfriend,
ที่แมวเขาอะไม่ได้เป็นคนที่หน้าตาดีเพราะคนหน้าตาดีๆเนี่ยก็ทำตัวเร็วๆเยอะไป
Excuse me? How can you say that about the person you're dating in front of them? Like, aren't you supposed to be attracted to her? Isn't that how it works? I'm confused. And I can't help but think about the actress who played in this scene and had to be casted as the ugly fat girlfriend. Yeah, the best role ever. We love that. We stand that. Like, what does that shit do to your confidence? Because all of these actors must either have the strongest mental health on earth, and honestly, I wish I was them, or must be hiding some deep trauma because of these acting experiences. So it's not a secret that a lot of Asian countries are absolutely obsessed with being thin. And Thailand is not an exception. It only takes one look on the most popular actor and actresses to see how thin the standard is. Especially especially for women, because we always have it worse in terms of beauty standards, because we're still living in a world where women are seen as bodies rather than, you know, full functioning human beings. But anyway, I really struggle to find actual studies on how Thai people stay so thin and why their standards are so thin. So I'm not really gonna comment on that. But what I want to comment on is really something that I found really striking in Thailand especially. Even though in every country the beauty standards are basically impossible to reach for the normal people, I think the dichotomy between Thailand's beauty standards and its real inhabitants is probably one of the saddest things I've ever witnessed. The standard is very thin, very pale skinned, either Chinese looking features or white looking features. It's no surprise for me that a lot of the biggest Thai celebrities are mixed half white, and that the fully Asian ones still look very pale skinned. When in reality Thai people are more tan and obesity is starting to be a real problem there. So once again, I can't imagine how heartbreaking it must be that the beauty standards of your own country don't look like you do. Setting aside colorism, because again I will definitely make a full video on it, I can't imagine how this fat shaming on national TV in the biggest airing shows affects the fat people of Thailand and the future fat people. I speak from experience when saying that loving yourself in a world that doesn't love you, that doesn't want you to exist as you do, is extremely hard. So those shows aren't helping at all. In fact, they're really dangerous and harmful. Sadly, I don't have a happy conclusion for this video, a happy the end sign, because I don't think fat shaming is gonna stop for a long time. It's not evolving anywhere, and I don't think it will for a few more decades. All I wish is for the people who are hurt by these shows to be able to heal and realize that your way doesn't define you. How others perceive you based on it doesn't define you. And this is gonna sound really cheesy, but you define yourself, baby. You're the writer of your own story, even when it doesn't feel like it. So everyone who's affected by these shows, susu. Don't ever let anyone jealous that you love yourself as you are, dim your light, and have a good day.
Like, thank you. I have no word. This is literally huge for me. Like, thank you. That's all I gotta say.